The Deep Space Communication Array aboard the Zephyrian flagship intercepted another burst of primitive radio waves from the third planet of a small yellow star. Admiral Vextar studied the decoded messages with growing amusement as his four eyes scanned the tactical displays. These humans spoke of railguns and kinetic projectiles like they were advanced weapons technology. The tall reptilian commander's scales shifted to a pale blue color that indicated humor among his species. They fire metal slugs at each other, Vextar announced to his bridge crew. Actual pieces of refined ore accelerated by magnetic fields. His tactical officer Zilimon clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter. Sir, our records show that most species abandon such crude methods within 50 years of developing energy weapons. These humans have had plasma theory for decades, yet still rely on throwing rocks. The Zephyrian Confederation had conquered or absorbed 47 different species across this arm of the galaxy. None had ever presented a serious challenge once. Their fleets engaged Zephyrian quantum disruptors and molecular phase shields. The humans would be no different. Their intercepted military communications revealed ships armed with chemical rockets, nuclear warheads, and these laughable railgun systems that barely achieved 15% of light speed, 3 billion kilometers. Away, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Endeavour as his sensor operator reported strange readings near the edge of their patrol zone. The research vessel had been conducting mineral surveys in the Proxima system when the massive alien ship appeared without warning. Morrison was a 30-year veteran of Earth's Merchant Marine who had transferred to military service when the colonies needed experienced spacers. Sir, the bogey is definitely artificial, reported Lieutenant Ben Walker from the sensor station. Hull composition unknown, but it's massive. At least 5 times larger than our biggest battleship. Morrison studied the readings and felt ice form in his stomach. Humanity had always wondered when they would encounter alien life, but most scientists expected first contact to involve radio signals or distant observations. This ship had simply materialized in human space without any attempt at communication. Open. A channel on all frequencies, Morrison ordered. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Human Systems vessel Endeavour. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. The response came within minutes, but not in any way Morrison had expected. The alien voice spoke perfect English through their communication system, though it carried strange harmonics that suggested artificial translation. Human vessel, you will surrender your ship immediately. I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Confederation Navy. Your species is hereby ordered to submit to Confederation authority and prepare for immediate colonization protocols. Morrison exchanged glances with Commander Lisa Hayes, the military liaison aboard his ship. Hayes was a career officer who had trained for theoretical first contact scenarios, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for such an aggressive opening statement. Admiral Vextar, we welcome contact with your people, Morrison replied carefully. However, we cannot speak for our entire species. We would like to arrange formal diplomatic discussions between our governments. The alien's response carried clear tones of mockery. Your primitive government has no authority to negotiate with the Confederation. We have monitored your communications and analyzed your military capabilities. Your weapons technology is obsolete by several centuries. Resistance would be both futile and amusing. Commander Hayes stepped forward and activated her own communication channel. Admiral, I represent Earth Defense Command. We're prepared to discuss terms, but we need time to consult with our leadership. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, Vextar replied. Our analysis shows your ships use kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Such weapons cannot penetrate our defensive systems. Do not waste lives attempting futile resistance. The communication channel closed abruptly, leaving Morrison's bridge crew in stunned silence. Through the viewports, they could see the massive alien ship maintaining position just outside the asteroid belt. It bristled with unfamiliar weapon arrays and pulsed with energy readings that made their sensors struggle to maintain locks. "Get MA at priority channel to Earth Defense Command," Morrison ordered, "and start a detailed scan of that ship. I want to know everything about their technology." Hayes was already working at her station, compiling the sensor data and communication records. "Sir, they're not bluffing about monitoring our communications. They knew our language, our ship classifications, even specific details about our weapon systems." Lieutenant Walker looked up from his console, with worry evident on his young face. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in our databases. Their power output alone is 10 times what our biggest fusion reactors can produce." On Earth, the emergency session of the Global Defense Council convened within 6 hours of receiving the Endeavor's report. President Karen Thompson sat at the head of the table, while military advisors and scientists scrambled to analyze the limited data available about their unexpected visitors. General Pete Collins, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, reviewed the tactical assessment with growing concern. "Their ship appears to be a single vessel, but it outmasses our entire battle fleet. If this represents standard Confederation technology, we're looking at a significant disadvantage in any direct confrontation." Dr. Amy Carter, Earth's leading weapons physicist, studied the energy readings with particular interest. She had spent her career working on advanced railgun technology and had always believed that kinetic weapons had untapped potential. The alien dismissal of human weapon systems struck her as oddly specific. "General, I'd like permission to review all available data on their defensive capabilities," Carter requested. "They seem very confident that our weapons can't harm them. But confidence and reality don't always match." Meanwhile, aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vextar convened his own tactical meeting. The bridge of the Void Render stretched nearly 200 meters from end to end, accommodating multiple species from across the Confederation. Holographic displays showed detailed analyses of human technology gleaned from intercepted communications, and long-range scans. Their largest kinetic projectiles achieve velocities of roughly 45,000 kilometers per second, reported Science Officer Kilthara. "Our molecular phase shields can absorb impacts from objects traveling 3 times that velocity without strain." Zileman activated a tactical display showing human ship configurations. "Admiral, their weapons appear to be electromagnetic acceleration systems firing dense metal projectiles. Some ships mount nuclear warheads, but their yield is insignificant compared to our defensive capabilities." Vextar studied the human ship designs with the same interest he might show examining an ancient museum piece. "Kinetic weapons," he mused. "We haven't encountered a species still using such primitive methods in over 2 centuries. Their projectiles will simply pass through our phase shields without interaction." The Confederation had fought dozens of wars across the galaxy, always emerging victorious through superior technology and tactics. Energy weapons, quantum disruptors, and molecular manipulation had rendered traditional kinetic weapons obsolete long ago. No known material could penetrate modern shielding systems when fired at the relatively slow speeds these humans achieved. "Sir, shall we begin the demonstration attack?" Zileman inquired. A show of force against one of their outer colonies would likely convince them to surrender without requiring a full invasion. Vextar considered the proposal while reviewing intelligence. Reports about human psychology. These creatures seemed emotional and protective of their civilian populations. A carefully targeted display of Confederation firepower would probably convince them that resistance was hopeless. "Prepare the fleet for a demonstration at their Alpha Centauri colony," Vextar ordered. "Destroy their orbital defenses, but leave the civilian infrastructure intact." Once they witness our capabilities, they'll submit peacefully. Back aboard the Endeavour, Captain Morrison received new orders from Earth Defense Command. He was to maintain position and continue diplomatic contact while human forces prepared for the worst-case scenario. The message also included a personal note from Dr. Carter requesting any additional sensor data about alien defensive systems. Commander Hayes, what's your assessment of their technological advantage? Morrison asked quietly. Hayes reviewed the tactical data one more time before responding. Honestly, sir, if they're telling the truth about our weapons being ineffective, we're in serious trouble. Our entire military doctrine is based on kinetic weapons and nuclear deterrence. If their shields can stop both, we don't have many options. Morrison nodded grimly as he watched the alien ship maintaining its ominous position. Humanity had always dreamed of joining a galactic community, but they had never imagined it would begin with an ultimatum and a countdown to invasion. The War Council aboard the Void Render gathered in the massive command chamber where Admiral Vexstar addressed his senior officers from 12 different species. Holographic displays showed human ship formations and weapon specifications that the Confederation had intercepted during the past 24 hours. The data painted a picture of laughably primitive military technology that made several officers struggle to contain their amusement. Fleet Admiral Kethfer, Vexstar's superior, who had arrived aboard a fast courier ship, examined the human tactical reports with growing disbelief. These creatures still use chemical propulsion for their smaller vessels, he announced to the assembled group. Their most advanced ships achieve barely 3% of light speed, and their primary weapons fire solid projectiles, accelerated by electromagnetic fields. Science Officer Kilfara activated a detailed analysis of human railgun technology. That showed tungsten rods being fired at velocities that seemed almost quaint by Confederation standards. Admiral, their projectiles reach maximum velocities of approximately 15% light speed. Our standard molecular phase shields are calibrated to deflect plasma bolts, traveling at 30% light speed while absorbing the energy of multiple stellar fusion reactions. The assembled officers murmured among themselves in various alien languages, but the tone was universally dismissive. The Confederation had encountered 47 different species during their expansion across this galaxy sector, and none had ever relied on such primitive kinetic weapons once they developed basic energy manipulation technology. Tactical Officer Zilamon displayed comparative analyses between human weapons and the standard armaments used by other species the Confederation had conquered. Sirs, even the Keltharian resistance fighters used plasma rifles and fusion warheads. The Vorthan Empire deployed quantum torpedo systems and antimatter charges. These humans appear to be centuries behind the normal technological development. Curve. Admiral Vexstar studied the reports while his tactical implants processed thousands of combat scenarios involving human forces. Every simulation showed the same result: complete Confederation victory within the first few minutes of engagement. Human projectiles would pass harmlessly through phase shields, while Confederation weapons sliced through human armor plating like it was paper. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison received his new orders from Earth Defense Command and immediately opened communications with the Zephyrian flagship. The directive was clear: stall for time while Earth's military forces prepared their defenses and evacuation procedures. Morrison was to appear cooperative while subtly gathering intelligence about alien capabilities. Admiral Vexstar, this is Captain Morrison, he transmitted on the established frequency. Earth Defense Command has authorized me to begin preliminary negotiations regarding your terms. The alien commander's response came quickly, carrying tones of impatience and condescension. Captain Morrison, there will be no negotiations. Your species will submit to Confederation authority or face the consequences of resistance. However, I am curious about your military preparations. Morrison had been briefed on this exact scenario by Commander Hayes and Earth's intelligence specialists. He was to appear honest and forthcoming while revealing information that would make human defenses seem even weaker than they actually were. "Admiral, I'll be honest with you," Morrison replied. "Our fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels of various classes. Our primary weapons are electromagnetic railguns, firing tungsten or depleted uranium projectiles at velocities ranging from 30 to 50,000 kilometers per second. The communication channel carried what sounded distinctly like alien laughter. "Captain, your honesty is refreshing but unnecessary. We have been monitoring your communications and analyzing your technology for several rotations. Your weapons are indeed primitive, but we appreciate the confirmation." Aboard the Void Render, the Zephyrian intelligence team worked frantically to decode and analyze every human military transmission they could intercept. The data they gathered painted an even more pathetic picture than their initial assessments had suggested. Human ships carried limited ammunition supplies. Their targeting systems relied on relatively simple computer guidance, and their armor consisted primarily of layered metallic composites. Lieutenant Commander Veltar, the intelligence officer, presented his findings to the command staff with barely concealed amusement. "Sirs, human railgun systems require significant charging time between shots, and their projectiles follow purely ballistic trajectories once fired. They appear to have no adaptive targeting capabilities and no exotic matter manipulation." Fleet Admiral Kethver reviewed the intelligence reports while comparing them to the weapon systems used by other species the Confederation had encountered. "This is remarkable," he commented. "Most species develop energy weapons within decades of achieving spaceflight. These humans have been traveling between stars for generations while still throwing metal slugs at each other." Back aboard the Endeavour, Lieutenant Ben Walker ran continuous combat simulations using the limited data they had gathered about Zephyrian technology. Every scenario ended the same way: human forces completely destroyed within minutes of engagement. The alien energy weapons could apparently slice through the heaviest human armor, while their defensive systems could absorb impacts that would devastate human ships. "Sir, I've run every possible tactical scenario," Walker reported to Morrison. "And Hayes, even if we concentrated our entire fleet against a single alien vessel, we couldn't penetrate their defensive systems. Their weapons outrange ours by several orders of magnitude." Commander Hayes studied the tactical projections with growing frustration. Earth's military doctrine had been built around the assumption that kinetic weapons would remain effective against any opponents they might encounter. The idea that an enemy could simply ignore railgun projectiles had never been seriously considered by human strategists. On Earth, President Thompson convened emergency sessions with military leaders and civilian advisors as reports continued arriving from the Endeavour. The alien ultimatum had been broadcast to every human colony, and panic was beginning to spread through the outer settlements as civilian ships crowded spaceports seeking transport to more secure systems. General Collins presented the latest intelligence estimates to the assembled leadership with obvious reluctance. "Based on the data from Captain Morrison, we're facing a technological disadvantage that may be insurmountable through conventional military means. Their defensive capabilities appear to render our entire weapons inventory obsolete." Dr. Amy Carter sat quietly in the corner of the briefing room, reviewing the technical specifications of Zephyrian shield systems that had been captured during the initial contact. Something about the energy patterns nagged at her scientific instincts, but she couldn't quite identify what was bothering her about the alien technology. "Dr. Carter, do you have any insights about potential weaknesses in their defensive systems?" President Thompson asked. Carter looked up from her tablet computer and frowned thoughtfully. "Madam President, their shields appear to be designed specifically to counter energy weapons and high-velocity plasma. The molecular phase technology they're using creates a barrier that energy-based attacks simply pass through without interaction. But our railguns fire solid projectiles, not energy, General Collins pointed out. Exactly, Carter replied. That's what's bothering me about their confidence. They keep dismissing our kinetic weapons, but their shield technology might have been developed to counter completely different threats. Admiral Vextar received updated intelligence reports about human defensive preparations and found them entirely predictable. The humans were evacuating civilian populations and concentrating their military forces around their primary worlds. Standard behavior for a species facing inevitable conquest. Sir, should we proceed with the demonstration attack on Alpha Centauri? Zilemon inquired. Their orbital defenses consist entirely of kinetic weapon platforms that pose no threat to our vessels. Vextar considered the proposal while reviewing the psychological profiles his analysts had developed for human leadership. These creatures appeared highly emotional and protective of their civilian populations. A carefully executed demonstration would likely convince them that resistance was futile. Prepare the secondary fleet for deployment to Alpha Centauri, Vextar ordered. Destroy their military installations, but avoid civilian casualties. Once they witness our capabilities, they should surrender without requiring a full invasion of their core systems. The Zephyrian fleet began moving toward the Alpha Centauri system, while human forces watched helplessly from long-range sensors. Morrison transmitted regular updates to Earth Defense Command, but everyone knew that the approaching demonstration would prove just how outmatched humanity really was. Dr. Carter requested permission to examine the captured shield frequency data more thoroughly, but time was running out. The aliens had made their technological superiority clear, and human leaders were already discussing evacuation procedures and guerrilla warfare tactics. What none of them realized was that sometimes the most dangerous assumption an enemy can make is that they understand your weapons better than you do. Dr. Amy Carter worked through the night in her laboratory aboard the UHS Montana, humanity's most advanced battleship, while Chief Engineer Roy Adams watched her calculations with growing concern. The massive vessel hung in orbit around Earth's moon as Carter installed her experimental modification to the ship's primary railgun system. Banks of quantum field generators hummed with barely contained energy as she made final adjustments to equipment that had never been tested at full scale. Doc, I've been building railgun systems for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this, Adams said as he examined Carter's blueprints. These quantum field manipulators will drain our entire power grid for a single shot. If this doesn't work, we'll be floating dead in space. Carter paused in her work to wipe sweat from her forehead as she considered the enormous risk they were taking. Her theoretical calculations showed that Zephyrian shields were specifically designed to counter energy weapons and high-velocity plasma, but they might have a critical weakness when faced with matter compressed beyond normal physical limits. Roy, their defensive systems phase shift to avoid interaction with energy attacks, she explained while connecting another power coupling. But if we can compress enough mass into a small enough space using quantum field manipulation, the gravitational effects might bypass their shields entirely. Captain Danny Foster stood on the Montana's bridge watching Earth's defense fleet assemble for what everyone knew would be a hopeless last stand. Foster had commanded the Montana for 8 years and had never faced a situation where his ship's survival depended entirely on untested experimental technology. Captain, we're receiving priority communications from Alpha Centauri, reported Communications Officer Jane Brooks. The Zephyrian fleet has begun their demonstration attack. The tactical display showed the destruction of Alpha Centauri's orbital defense platforms in real time. Zephyrian quantum disruptors sliced through human installations like they were made of paper while human railgun projectiles passed harmlessly through alien shields without any apparent effect. The demonstration lasted less than 10 minutes before the Zephyrian ships withdrew, leaving smoking wreckage where humanity's outer defenses had been. "Sir, the colony reports no civilian casualties," Brooks continued. "The aliens only targeted military installations, but they completely destroyed everything our forces had built there." Foster watched the tactical readouts with a sinking feeling in his stomach. The Alpha Centauri defense platforms had been armed with the most advanced railgun systems in human space, and the aliens had brushed them aside without taking any damage whatsoever. Aboard the Void Render, Admiral Vextar reviewed the demonstration results with satisfaction. Human weapons had performed exactly as predicted, firing solid projectiles that passed through Zephyrian phase shields without any interaction at all. The molecular barriers simply shifted their quantum state whenever kinetic objects approached, allowing the tungsten rods to travel harmlessly through empty space. "Sir, human forces are concentrating around their primary world," reported Tactical Officer Zillimon. "Long-range sensors show approximately 100 vessels in defensive formation. Should we proceed with the final ultimatum?" Vixstar studied the human fleet positions and noted their desperate attempt to create overlapping fields of fire around Earth. Standard defensive doctrine for a technologically inferior species, though it would prove entirely useless against Confederation weapons. "Broadcast our final terms," Vextar ordered. 6 hours for complete surrender, or we will begin systematic destruction of their military forces. Back in her laboratory, Dr. Carter made the final connections to her quantum compression system, while Adams ran power flow calculations on his tablet computer. The experimental projectile sat in a specially designed containment field, looking deceptively small for something that would determine humanity's fate. "The projectile mass is compressed neutronium from a stellar remnant," Carter explained to Foster, who had come down to observe the final preparations. "Under normal circumstances, it weighs about as much as a marble, but the quantum field maintains compression that gives it the mass of a small asteroid." Foster examined the innocuous-looking projectile with amazement and terror. "What happens when it hits their shields?" "If my calculations are correct, the quantum field will collapse on impact," Carter replied. "The neutronium will expand back to its true mass in microseconds, creating gravitational effects that should bypass their phase-shifting technology." Adams looked up from his calculations with worry evident on his weathered face. "Captain, this system will require every joule of power our fusion reactors can produce. Once we fire, we'll have maybe 30 minutes of life support before the backup systems fail." The weight of the decision pressed down on Foster as he considered the implications. If Carter's experiment failed, the Montana would be defenseless, and humanity would lose its most advanced battleship without achieving anything. If they didn't try, Earth would fall within hours anyway. "Dr. Carter, what's your confidence level in these calculations?" Foster asked. Carter hesitated before answering. "Honestly, Captain, the quantum field theory is sound, but we've never tested neutronium compression at this scale. I'm confident about the physics, but there are variables we simply can't account for without actual combat data." Meanwhile, Zephyrian scientists aboard the Void Render completed their analysis of captured human railgun technology and found their rare initial assessments confirmed. The humans used electromagnetic acceleration to fire dense metal projectiles at velocities that would have been impressive several centuries ago but posed no threat to modern defensive systems. Science Officer Kilthara presented her final report to Admiral Vextar with the confidence that came from analyzing dozens of similar technologies throughout their military campaigns. "Sir, human kinetic weapons achieve maximum projectile velocities of roughly 15% light speed using tungsten or depleted uranium ammunition. Our phase shields can easily accommodate objects traveling 3 times that velocity. What? About their nuclear warheads? Vexstar inquired. Primitive fusion devices with yields equivalent to early stellar manipulation technology, Kelthara replied dismissively. Our molecular barriers can absorb the energy output of several such weapons without strain. The Zephyrian fleet began moving toward Earth in tight formation with the massive void render at the center. Their tactical doctrine called for close range deployment to maximize psychological impact while demonstrating the futility of human resistance. Dr. Carter completed her final system checks as Earth's 6-hour deadline approached. The quantum field generators were operating within acceptable parameters, and the neutronium projectile remained stable in its compressed state. Chief Engineer Adams had rerouted every available power source to the experimental railgun system, leaving the Montana's other weapons and defensive systems completely offline. Roy, initiate the charging sequence, Carter ordered as she activated her control console. We'll have exactly 1 shot at this. The Montana's massive railgun began drawing power from the ship's fusion reactors as electromagnetic coils charged to unprecedented levels. Energy readings climbed beyond anything the weapon had ever been designed to handle, while quantum field manipulators created localized distortions in space-time around the barrel. Captain Foster opened a communication. Channel to Earth Defense Command. Control, this is Montana Actual. We are proceeding with the experimental weapon test. If this fails, tell my family I tried to save them. The response came from General Collins himself. Montana, you have authorization for weapons free. Earth Defense Command sends its hopes and prayers. Lieutenant Commander Sue Miller, the Montana's science officer, confirmed target acquisition on the void render as the alien fleet approached within 3 million kilometers of Earth. The massive Zephyrian flagship dominated their sensors, its shields operating at maximum power, while weapon arrays prepared for the final assault on human civilization. Dr. Carter, we have firing solution on the primary target, Miller reported. Alien shields are at full strength, and they show no concern for our position. Carter's hands moved across her control panel as she initiated the final firing sequence. The quantum field generator hummed with barely contained energy as it prepared to collapse the neutronium projectile to its absolute compression limit. Around them, the Montana's lights dimmed as every available watt of power flowed into the experimental weapon system. Quantum field stable, Carter announced. Projectile compression nominal. All systems show green for firing. Foster took a deep breath and gave the order that would either save humanity or ensure the Montana's destruction. Dr. Carter, you are authorized to fire when ready. The experimental railgun reached full charge as 3 million kilometers away. Admiral Vexstar prepared to broadcast humanity's final surrender demand. The Zephyrian fleet approached Earth in perfect formation with Admiral Vexstar's massive flagship at the center, surrounded by 12 smaller vessels that still dwarfed anything in humanity's space fleet. The void renders communication arrays broadcast surrender demands to every human world simultaneously, while weapon systems charged for the systematic destruction of Earth's orbital defenses. People of Earth, this is Admiral Vexstar of the Zephyrian Confederation Navy, the transmission began. Your demonstration of futile resistance at Alpha Centauri has shown the vast difference in our technological capabilities. You have 6 hours to surrender unconditionally or face total annihilation of your military forces and occupation of your worlds. On the bridge of the UHS Montana, Captain Danny Foster watched the alien fleet approach while Dr. Amy Carter made final adjustments to her experimental quantum compression system 3 decks below. The railgun's electromagnetic coils hummed with barely contained energy as power flowed from every fusion reactor aboard the massive battleship. Sir, the alien fleet is maintaining tight formation. reported Lieutenant Commander Sue Miller from the science station. They're showing no concern for our weapons range or defensive positioning. Their shields are operating at maximum strength. Foster studied the tactical display, showing the overwhelming disparity between human and alien forces. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of 200 ships, armed with conventional railguns and nuclear warheads that had already proven completely ineffective against Zephyrian technology. Range to primary target? Foster asked. 2.8 million kilometers in closing, Miller replied. The flagship will be within optimal firing range in approximately 4 minutes. In her laboratory, Dr. Carter monitored the quantum field. Generators that kept her neutronium projectile compressed beyond normal physical limits. The experimental ammunition looked like an ordinary metal marble, but containment readings showed it maintained the gravitational mass of a small asteroid through continuous quantum field manipulation. Roy, how are the power levels? Carter asked. Chief Engineer Adams, who was monitoring the massive energy drain from his mobile control unit. We're pulling every available watt from the fusion reactors. Adams replied with sweat beading on his forehead. Once we fire this thing, we'll have maybe 20 minutes of life support before the backup systems fail completely. Carter nodded grimly as she ran final calculations on her tablet computer. The physics were sound according to every theoretical model she could construct, but they were venturing into completely unexplored territory with technology that had never been tested under combat conditions. Aboard the Void Render, Tactical Officer Zillimon reviewed the positioning of human defensive forces and found their deployment entirely predictable. The primitive vessels had arranged themselves in overlapping formations around their homeworld, apparently hoping that concentrated firepower might somehow overcome the vast technological gap. Admiral, human forces are maintaining defensive positions around their primary world, Zillimon reported. Long-range scans show their largest vessel at extreme range, approximately 3 million kilometers from our formation. Admiral Vexstar glanced at the tactical display with mild interest before dismissing the lone human ship as irrelevant. At such extreme range, even the humans' most powerful railgun systems would be completely ineffective due to targeting limitations and projectile dispersion. A single ship attempting to engage at maximum range, Vexstar observed with amusement. These humans apparently believe that distance will somehow improve their chances of penetrating our defensive systems. Science Officer Kilthara confirmed that the distant human vessel posed no threat to Confederation forces. Sir, at 3 million kilometers, their projectiles would require nearly 30 seconds to reach our position. Our point defense systems could easily intercept such slow-moving objects, and our shields would phase shift long before impact. The Zephyrian command staff shared what passed for laughter among their various species as they considered the desperation that would drive humans to attempt such a hopeless attack. Standard Confederation doctrine called for enemy forces to be destroyed systematically, starting with the most dangerous targets and working down to the least threatening. Back aboard the Montana, Dr. Carter received confirmation that her quantum compression system had reached optimal operating parameters. The neutronium projectile remained stable in its impossibly compressed state, while field generators created localized distortions in spacetime that made nearby instruments struggle to maintain accurate readings. Captain Foster to Weapons Bay, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Dr. Carter, we have firing solution confirmed on the primary target. Are you ready to proceed? Carter took a deep breath and activated her communication panel. Captain, all systems show green. The quantum field is stable and projectile compression is nominal. We have one shot at this. Foster's voice carried the weight of humanity's survival as he responded. Dr. Carter, you are authorized to fire when ready. Earth Defense Command has confirmed weapons free. The experimental railgun reached full charge as electromagnetic coils created magnetic fields, powerful enough to accelerate the compressed neutronium projectile to unprecedented velocities. Energy readings climbed beyond anything the weapon had ever been designed to handle, while quantum field manipulators prepared to release their grip on the impossibly dense ammunition. Initiating firing sequence, Carter announced as her fingers moved across the control panel. Quantum field collapse in 10 seconds. 3 million kilometers away, Admiral Vextar prepared to order the final assault on Earth's orbital defenses when his sensor operator reported an energy spike from the distant human vessel. "Sir, the lone human ship is charging their primary weapon system," the operator announced. Energy readings indicate a railgun of unusual design, but at this range, they cannot possibly achieve an effective hit. Vextar studied the readings with professional curiosity rather than concern. The humans appeared to be attempting some sort of desperation attack using their primitive kinetic weapons, but the laws of physics made success impossible at such extreme range. "Let them fire," Vextar ordered dismissively. "Their projectile will take nearly 30 seconds to reach us, assuming they can even achieve proper targeting at this distance. It will be instructive for our tactical database." Dr. Carter's quantum field generators reached critical compression as the neutronium projectile approached the absolute limit of matter density that their technology could achieve. Warning lights flashed throughout the weapons bay as containment. Systems strained to maintain control over forces that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. "Field collapse imminent," Carter announced. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Montana's experimental railgun discharged with a flash of energy that briefly outshone nearby stars as the quantum compressed. Neutronium projectile streaked away from the barrel at nearly 25% of light speed. The electromagnetic coils overloaded instantly, but their job was complete as the impossible ammunition began its journey across the void. Chief Engineer Adams watched power readings plummet throughout the ship as fusion reactors struggled to recover from the massive energy drain. "That's it," he announced grimly. "We've got backup power for life support and nothing else." The compressed projectile raced across space faster than any kinetic weapon humanity had ever created, while quantum fields maintained its impossible density. To Zephyrian sensors, it appeared as just another primitive human projectile that their shields would easily deflect. "Incoming projectile confirmed," reported the Void Render's tactical officer. "Impact in 22 seconds. All defensive systems are operating normally." Admiral Vextar watched the approaching projectile with the same interest he might show examining an insect. The object was traveling faster than typical human ammunition, but still well within the parameters their defensive systems had been designed to handle. "Maintain course and formation," Vextar ordered. "Let this projectile demonstrate the futility of human resistance once and for all." The quantum-compressed neutronium slug continued its approach toward the Zephyrian flagship while aboard the Montana. Dr. Carter monitored the projectile's trajectory with growing tension. Everything depended on her theoretical calculations about the interaction between compressed matter and alien phase shift technology. "Projectile maintaining course and velocity," reported Lieutenant Commander Miller. "Impact with the primary. Target in 15 seconds. Captain Foster opened a ship-wide communication channel as the Montana drifted powerless through space. "All hands, prepare for whatever comes next. If Dr. Carter's experiment works, we may have just saved Earth. If it doesn't, it's been an honor serving with all of you." The neutronium projectile closed the final distance to the Void Render while Zephyrian phase shields prepared to shift quantum states and allow the primitive human ammunition to pass harmlessly through empty space, just as dozens of similar projectiles had done during the Alpha Centauri demonstration. The quantum-compressed neutronium projectile struck the Void Render's forward shields at 25% of light speed, while Zephyrian defensive systems automatically shifted to their standard phase displacement mode. For a microsecond, the alien technology worked exactly as designed, allowing the incoming object to pass through the molecular barrier without any energy transfer or interaction. Then physics took over in ways the Confederation had never encountered. Before the quantum field containing the compressed neutronium collapsed on contact with the phase-shifted shield matrix, and the marble-sized projectile instantly expanded back to its true gravitational mass. In the space of 3 microseconds, the equivalent mass of a small asteroid materialized inside the Void Render's defensive perimeter, creating gravitational forces that no shield technology had ever been designed to counter. Admiral Vextar had exactly enough time to register the impossible sensor readings before his flagship tore itself apart. A gravitational shockwave ripped through the massive vessel's hull like it was made of paper, severing power conduits and collapsing bulkheads as the ship's own structural integrity failed under forces that shouldn't exist. The forward third of the Void Render simply ceased to exist as gravitational tidal forces scattered its component atoms across several cubic kilometers of space. The middle section folded in on itself, while the rear portion spun away like a child's discarded toy, venting atmosphere and debris into the void. But the destruction didn't stop there. The gravitational distortion continued expanding outward from the impact point, catching the 6 nearest Zephyrian vessels in its deadly embrace. The heavy cruiser Quantum Spear broke apart along its central axis, while the destroyer formations flanking the flagship crumpled like tin cans under the impossible gravitational gradients. Captain Danny Foster watched the destruction unfold on the Montana's emergency sensors, while his crew struggled to believe what they were seeing. In 30 seconds, humanity's single experimental shot had eliminated the core of the most powerful military force in their sector of the galaxy. "Sir, confirmed 7 enemy vessels destroyed," reported Lieutenant Commander Sue Miller with amazement evident in her voice. "The remaining alien ships are breaking formation and retreating at maximum acceleration." Aboard the surviving Zephyrian vessels, panic spread through the command structures as officers tried to comprehend what had just happened. Fleet Captain Nordem, now the senior surviving officer, stared at the wreckage of the Void Render while his tactical staff frantically analyzed the impossible weapon that had just rewritten their understanding of human capabilities. "How is this possible?" Nordem demanded as he watched debris from Admiral Vextar's flagship spreading across thousands of kilometers. "Human kinetic weapons cannot create gravitational effects. Our intelligence reports confirmed they use primitive electromagnetic acceleration systems." Science Officer Thekmal worked desperately to analyze the sensor recordings from the moment of impact, but the data made no sense according to established Confederation physics. "Sir, the human projectile appeared to undergo some form of mass transformation upon contact with our shields. The gravitational signature indicates matter compression beyond theoretical limits." The remaining Zephyrian ships retreated to a safe distance while their commanders grappled with the realization that everything they knew about human technology was apparently wrong. These primitive creatures had somehow developed weapons that could bypass the most advanced defensive systems in known space. "Send an emergency transmission to Confederation High Command," Nordem ordered. "Priority Alpha classification. The humans possess weapons technology that our current defensive doctrine cannot counter." Back on Earth, celebration erupted across every human world as news of the impossible victory spread through communication networks. President Karen Thompson addressed the global population from the Emergency Command Center while military leaders struggled to process the magnitude of what Dr. Amy Carter had achieved. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," Thompson announced, "I am proud to report that our forces have successfully repelled the alien invasion. The enemy fleet has been destroyed or driven from our space through the courage and ingenuity of our military personnel. Dr. Carter sat exhausted in her laboratory aboard the powerless Montana, surrounded by the smoking remains of her experimental quantum compression system. The weapon had worked exactly once, destroying itself in the process. But that single shot had been enough to save humanity from extinction. Chief Engineer Roy Adams worked frantically to restore basic power to the Montana while rescue ships approached from Earth's orbital stations. "Doc, that was either the most brilliant or the most insane thing I've ever seen," he said while replacing burned-out power couplings. "We're lucky the quantum field collapse didn't tear our own ship apart." The news of humanity's victory spread beyond human space within hours, as communication networks carried reports of the impossible battle to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had been considering their own invasions of human territory quietly abandoned their plans, while others began reaching out through diplomatic channels. The Altarian Republic, longtime rivals of the Zephyrian Confederation, sent congratulatory messages to Earth along with proposals for mutual defense agreements. The Keltharian Trade Union offered exclusive commerce partnerships, while dozens of smaller species requested permission to establish embassies in human space. Within a week, Fleet Captain Nordum received orders from Confederation High Command to negotiate immediate peace terms with humanity. The political implications of losing 7 warships to a single human vessel had sent shockwaves through the Confederation government, leading to emergency sessions and urgent policy reviews. The Confederation Council has authorized me to offer immediate cessation of hostilities, Nordum transmitted to Earth Defense Command. We wish to establish diplomatic relations and discuss mutual cooperation between our species. President Thompson and her advisors spent days reviewing the sudden flood of diplomatic requests from alien governments that had previously ignored human existence. The balance of power had shifted overnight, and humanity found itself transformed from prey to predator in galactic politics. Dr. Carter became the most famous human in the galaxy, though she continued working on defensive applications of her quantum compression technology. The secret of the neutronium railgun was classified at the highest levels, but the knowledge that humans could create such weapons changed everything. The irony is that we only had enough compressed neutronium for one shot, Carter explained to General Pete Collins during a classified briefing. If the aliens had known that, they might have pressed their attack despite the losses. Captain Foster and the crew of the Montana received humanity's highest decorations for their role in the victory, though they understood better than anyone how close Earth had come to destruction. If Carter's experimental weapon had failed, the alien fleet would have overwhelmed human defenses within hours. The Zephyrian Confederation formally requested peace negotiations within 2 weeks, offering favorable trade agreements and technology sharing arrangements. Other alien species that had dismissed humanity as primitive began studying human scientific literature with newfound respect. Earth's military doctrine underwent rapid transformation as scientists worked to understand and replicate Carter's quantum compression technology. The age of human expansion began not through conquest, but through the hard-earned respect of species that had learned to fear human ingenuity. Humanity went from being dismissed as technologically primitive to being feared and respected across dozens of star systems. The lesson spread throughout the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to fight by conventional rules. The quantum railgun remained humanity's most closely guarded secret, but its single use had demonstrated that human creativity and determination could overcome even overwhelming technological disadvantages. In a galaxy where energy weapons and exotic matter manipulation dominated warfare, one species had proven that sometimes the simplest ideas could be the most devastating. The balance of power had been rewritten by a single shot, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.